Aber so richtig krass. Guck mal die Bäume an! Alter! Da ist ein Bäume weg.
Wow! 好刺激啊！哇！哇！
Paramedics carried a boy with cerebral palsy down 4 flights of stairs after the elevator failed and rising water threatened the building. His wheelchair was damaged, but they improvised with a rolling dolly and straps. They didn't hesitate, said his mother. They treated him like family. The family was later airlifted to a shelter equipped for medical needs. When the winds ripped the roof from their small home, Ana Martinez had only seconds to react. She threw a mattress over her 2 young sons and laid across it as debris slammed into the walls and shattered glass flew. It sounded like a freight train crashing through the sky, she said. For nearly an hour, she held still, praying the house wouldn't collapse. The family was later found shaken but unharmed. The house was destroyed, except for the bedroom where they hid. She saved their lives, one responder said. Pure instinct and courage. First responders were stunned to find an SUV lodged halfway into the second-floor balcony of an apartment complex. According to witnesses, The parked vehicle was lifted by extreme winds during the hurricane's peak and hurled across a 40-foot embankment. No one was inside the SUV, and the residents of the affected apartment were unharmed. "I thought it was a bomb going off," said one tenant. Engineers say wind acceleration between nearby buildings likely created a tunnel effect. "It wasn't a strong wind. It was focused, violent wind," said a structural analyst on scene. The downtown business district was left in ruins after sustained winds sheared off signage, shattered storefronts, and caused partial collapses in 4 commercial buildings. The city estimates more than $70 million in damage to infrastructure alone. Crews are still working to clear glass and metal from the main thoroughfares. Of the 123 businesses surveyed post-storm, only 27 were able to reopen. Local officials have requested federal disaster relief as cleanup efforts intensify. An old man stood in the ruins of his workshop, running his hands over rusted tools he'd once polished every week. The wind had knocked down one wall, but left the other 3 standing, like a set on a stage. He didn't speak much as neighbors offered help. Instead, he swept sawdust from the floor, straightened a stool, and set a bent hammer carefully on the bench. "It's not gone," he finally said, "just quieter now." Three fishermen who stayed aboard their boat during the storm are missing. The vessel's GPS last pinged 2 miles offshore before signals were lost. Debris believed to be from the boat washed ashore Sunday. Search efforts continue by air and sea, though officials say conditions are challenging. The families are urging anyone with information to contact authorities. During the height of the storm, a power crew spotted a cow standing calmly on the 2nd-story balcony of an abandoned motel. The wind had apparently pushed it up a ramp and into the building. The balcony railing kept it from falling. It was safely led back to ground level once winds died down. Locals now call it the flying cow miracle, and the motel owner says he's never seen anything like it. "Still had better manners than most guests," he added. A canine search team located 2 missing teens in a collapsed shed behind their home. They had taken shelter there after the main house roof failed. The dog alerted to movement under debris. Rescuers dug them out with hand tools. Both were cold and bruised, but safe. "We thought no one knew we were here," said one of the teens through tears. Preliminary assessments show that nearly 70% of homes and buildings in the coastal counties sustained wind-related damage during the recent hurricane. Over 40 mobile homes were completely overturned, and at least 12 commercial structures lost significant portions of their roofs. Utility poles were snapped along 19 major roads, and wind gusts were measured up to 129 miles per hour in some areas. Officials noted that older buildings were disproportionately affected. Insurance teams have begun documenting losses, with early estimates in the hundreds of millions. Emergency shelters remain at capacity as debris removal continues. During peak gusts, Harold Grant stepped outside to check on his generator and was lifted off his feet by hurricane winds. He landed 30 feet away in a muddy ditch, stunned but alive. "It felt like a hand just picked me up and dropped me," he said. He suffered bruises and a fractured wrist, but managed to crawl back inside his home before the next wave of wind hit. Emergency crews later found trees snapped like twigs in his yard. "I'll never take wind warnings lightly again," Grant said from his hospital bed, smiling weakly. After the storm, a cross made of driftwood was discovered lodged upright in a sand dune where dozens had sought shelter. Locals have since preserved it as a symbol. "It felt like he marked the place where we were saved," said one evacuee. "We'll never move it." Coast Guard crews rescued 27 people from rooftops in one suburb alone. High water made roads impassable, and helicopters worked for hours. Most were elderly, some waving towels or flashlights. One couple was lowered in a harness with their cat in a laundry basket. All were taken to a makeshift landing zone at the football stadium and evaluated for injuries. Following the hurricane's landfall, hundreds of birds were found lifeless across downtown rooftops and streets. apparently killed mid-flight by powerful wind bursts. Experts believe the sudden pressure changes and extreme gusts disoriented or crushed them mid-air. They had no chance, said a local wildlife official. It was like a wall of air moving at highway speeds. Residents were stunned by the eerie sight. It looked like they just fell from the sky, one woman said. Cleanup crews collected the bodies as part of post-storm recovery. Scientists call the event rare, but not unprecedented. An entire field of solar panels was ripped from its mounts and scattered across neighboring properties. One panel pierced the roof of a church 2 miles away, embedding itself in the pews. Another was found stuck in the side of a moving train. Despite the destruction, no injuries were reported. Engineers say wind uplift during the storm exceeded what most solar farms are designed to handle. Cleanup could take weeks, with fragments turning up in yards across 3 counties. In one neighborhood, a woman returned to find her brother's car still in the driveway, keys inside but no sign of him. His phone last pinged from the cell tower nearby minutes before landfall. Teams searched surrounding woods and ditches. As of Friday, he remains missing. It is one of 127 open missing person cases linked to the storm. I was holding a mug of coffee when it happened. 1 second, the porch was there, the swing, the plants, the little welcome mat. The next, it lifted like a magic carpet and vanished into the sky. I didn't scream. I just stood there with the door open and wind roaring like a jet engine. That porch had been there since '89. My daughter took her prom pictures on it. My dog gave birth under it, and now it's gone. I found the swing 2 blocks away, still swaying. Everything else? Somewhere in Kansas, maybe. The morning after, children wandered the neighborhood, pointing out what had changed. "That tree wasn't broken before," one said. "That trampoline wasn't there." They turned it into a game, spot the difference, but the parents watched in silence, tallying lost cars, collapsed roofs, shredded fences. One boy found a soggy storybook in a ditch and began reading aloud, sitting cross-legged on the wet sidewalk. Others joined him. For a moment, no one remembered the night's terror, only the sound of a child's voice trying to bring a story back to life. A pastor live-streamed prayers throughout the hurricane, using backup battery packs. Hundreds tuned in from darkened homes and flooded shelters. It kept us connected, one viewer wrote. I couldn't see the sky, but I could hear faith. The stream ran 14 hours without pause. After the storm passed, silence fell so suddenly it felt wrong. Everything that once made sound, birds, cars, wind chimes, was gone or broken. James stood barefoot in the wet grass, staring at the sky. His house had lost half its roof, and a pine tree lay across his porch. But all he could think about was how quiet the world had become. It felt like the wind stole the noise, he later told a neighbor. That night, he slept on a mattress in the garage, listening for anything to return. A woman driving home before the worst of the winds hit watched in horror as the truck in front of her lifted off the highway and spun like a paper cup before crashing into a ditch. She pulled over, heart pounding, expecting the worst, but the driver crawled out, dazed but unharmed. He looked more confused than injured, she said. Authorities said the wind reached over 110 miles per hour in that area, enough to lift lightweight vehicles off the road surface. In the early hours after the hurricane made landfall, 62-year-old Marvin Ellis carried his paralyzed neighbor 2 miles through waist-high floodwaters to reach a rescue point. With no cell service and streets submerged, Ellis wrapped the man in plastic sheeting, tied him to his back with extension cords, and waded through swirling debris. I couldn't leave him. He's family, Ellis said. Both were treated for exhaustion and exposure. Paramedics say their survival came down to Ellis's strength, calm thinking, and deep sense of duty. He saved my life, the neighbor whispered from his hospital bed. After the hurricane and widespread flooding along the southern coast, rescue teams found 17-year-old Lucas Reyes floating alone through a submerged neighborhood, clinging to the door of a refrigerator. His family's trailer had been swept away overnight. Using jumper cables, Reyes tied himself to the door and drifted for 16 hours through dark, debris-filled waters. I just kept thinking I had to stay awake, he told medics. Cold, dehydrated, and covered in cuts, he was taken to a local hospital and is expected to recover fully. Emergency officials called his survival remarkable and credited his quick thinking under pressure. A man's entire roof was torn off in a single gust. But what stunned neighbors most was that it landed upright, perfectly intact, 2 houses down. It was like a hat blown off someone's head, one witness said. No one was hurt, though the home is now considered structurally unsafe. Insurance adjusters called it an extremely rare wind pattern event. The homeowner joked, "If anyone needs a roof, I've got a spare." Responders searching a flooded street found a 2-year-old girl sitting on a floating couch, soaked but alive, her arms wrapped tightly around the family dog. No adults were nearby. The home had been destroyed hours earlier, and it's believed the rising water lifted the furniture to safety. The dog, a Labrador mix, reportedly barked until rescuers approached. Both were taken to a shelter, where the girl was quickly reunited with relatives. "We don't know how they survived," one firefighter said, but that dog never left her side. Authorities are calling it a small miracle amid widespread devastation. When the winds began tearing shingles from roofs, 68-year-old Lester Jennings ran outside to retrieve his garbage bins. A sudden gust knocked him off his feet and sent him sliding across his lawn. He grabbed onto the metal base of his mailbox and held on as the wind roared over him. "I thought I'd be blown into the next county," he said. When the storm passed, he was soaked, bruised, but alive. His mailbox was bent and his house badly damaged, but Jennings credits that metal post for saving his life. "Strongest thing I ever installed," he joked. When the hurricane hit, 16-year-old Brianna lost nearly everything. Her family's home was badly damaged, and most of their belongings vanished in the wind. But 3 days later, a neighbor found her bright blue prom dress tangled in a tree 3 miles away, still intact. "It sounds silly," she said, but it was the one thing that felt normal. Volunteers cleaned and restored it. Local businesses are now planning a community prom for displaced teens. "After everything we've lost," Brianna said, "this one dress being found made it feel like hope's still out there." A rescue team responding to a 911 call found an elderly man trapped in his attic by rising water. He had broken through the ceiling with a crowbar and waited for 18 hours with a flashlight and a transistor radio. "They heard the tapping from the boat," he said. He was dehydrated but otherwise fine. "They were angels," he said of the crew. When the hurricane hit, 74-year-old Tom Delaney refused to leave his hilltop cabin. He reinforced the windows, tied himself to a structural beam with old climbing rope, and waited. Outside, winds tore shingles and trees from the ground. Inside, the house trembled, but held. It was like standing in the path of a train for 5 hours, he said. When the storm passed, neighbors found him covered in dust, sipping cold coffee, and still strapped in. Stubborn doesn't begin